Welcome to the Hidden World of Women, a podcast brought to you by Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. My name is Emma and I'll be your host for today's episode. Today I'm joined by Claire, the founder of the Kai Erdley Foundation, which is also known as Kai Fella. And Claire is Kai's mum. So Claire is going to speak with us about her experience of losing Kai to mental illness and raging anxiety leading or ending in suicide. Speak with us about her experiences of that and how that led to the foundation of Kai Fella and everything in between. So thank you so much for joining me this morning, Claire.
Thank you for having me.
So if we get started, can you tell us a little bit about Kai?
Yeah. Kai was, he had the world at his feet. He was the most energetic, enigmatic, handsome young man, high achieving, incredibly smart, incredibly naughty as well. So, whether those two things go hand in hand. Naughty, funny, entertaining, smart, a typical little boy growing up. So, was had a few hiccups on his road through school. Ended up graduating from Aquinas and studying physiotherapy, and was in his second year of physiotherapy when unfortunately the wheels came crashing, falling off. So,
and we're recording this a little bit early. So we're recording this for 5 days prior to the 5-year anniversary.
Yeah.
We're putting this episode out in response to Suicide Awareness Day.
Yeah.
So how old was Kai 5 years ago?
So he was just 20. It was 6 weeks.
Still a baby.
Yeah, 6 weeks before his 21st. So typically, a hard year from a social anxiety point of view. I think he'd battled with his anxiety for probably since year 11, year 12, when obviously the workload gets really intense, and he'd put himself under a huge amount of pressure to achieve and to get a high ATAR, which, in retrospect, it's really irrelevant.
It's just a number. It doesn't really mean anything, does it?
Doesn't really mean anything. So, studied really hard, had some panic attacks, had some anxiety during and throughout that year 11, year 12 period. Did well enough to get in and to do physiotherapy. And then, it was July before he would have been 21 in the September that we lost him. So
it must have been absolutely devastating.
Yes. Yeah, you don't ever want to go through that.
And have you found words to be able to describe what that was like?
Look, people ask me, did I know if I knew Kai was struggling? Yes, I did. Kai was incredibly sad. He struggled with being left. He was very anxious. He didn't really want to be left by himself. He was struggling with sleeping. We'd been on the day that we actually lost him. He was at the psychiatrist in the morning, who and I'd gone with him, and the whole problem with youth and male anxiety, I think, from my perspective, and again, everything that I say comes from my own personal experience.
And that's, I suppose, that's
I'm not an expert.
That's a good qualification to make, is that we are speaking as, I'm talking to you as Kai's mum.
Yeah.
I'm not talking to you as a psychiatrist or a counsellor.
I'm not a health professional. Mm-hmm. So, in the early parts, I brought the boys up to, I'm the mother of 3, and Kai was my middle child. 2 didn't seem to be branded with any anxiety, and he seemed to cop the lot.
He got the family share.
Yeah, and you think that you parent your boys equally, and I brought them up to be independent, and sometimes I think from an anxiety point of view that probably doesn't work in their favour. So, my advice for him to go to the GP and to get on a mental health plan, even that was overwhelming for him. He didn't have the words to speak to the doctors or to get the help that he wanted or to get the medication that he wanted. So, then as a parent, as an 18-year-old, you sort of take away a lot of those skills that you've given him to be self-sufficient, and you go, well, okay, come on, I'll take you to the doctor, you know, I'll step in. And it's a double-edged sword, because you're helping them, but you're almost, you know, demasculating them in a way, because you're taking away that adulthood that you've tried to give them. So
it's hard, because you want to step in and be the advocate for somebody who you love.
Yeah, but at 18, they're deemed to be adult enough to... But he didn't have the words. He didn't have the words to describe it. And I think that's, you know, that was really challenging for me as a parent to actually witness that and step in and take him to the doctors and to get all the, the depression questionnaire filled out, and to see just how sad this little person was. Because it's a sadness that you or I hopefully will never have to feel. And I think if you're living with that degree of pain and sadness, they say that suicide isn't chosen. It just has to happen to be rid of the pain. So, it wasn't my plan for Kai. It's not what I would have chosen. But to know that whatever he's doing, he's in a better place than what he was when he was here. So, the legacy of what we've started for the foundation, his name will live on, and his name will become a household name, and and hopefully help other young men and other young West Australians. That's the plan.
Yeah, there's a beautiful saying that, I think it's beautiful, that we have 3 deaths. So our first is when we take our last breath. The second is when our body returns to the earth, and our third is when our name is spoken for the last time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, his name will never be spoken for the last time. Yeah. So his name will be, he will be remembered. So that's my goal, is to say his name every day. So as hard as it is, obviously, to talk about, the events of that day. We will continue to try and make a difference and change the stigma that's around suicide, and obviously the foundation that we've set up is aimed at giving boys a voice. Having been a parent and tried to implement all the things and put the things into place for him, I think the thing that I didn't give him was the voice and the ability just to speak out and just to tell me exactly how sad he was. So that's sort of where our foundation evolved from. So.
And it's true, we do kind of have this thing that we should be happy every single day.
Yeah.
And, this pressure to not necessarily share when we're not feeling on top of the world.
Yeah.
And, the response is quite often, well, chin up, she'll be right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, the stiff upper lip. Yeah. And, I'm probably guilty of that with an English heritage of teaching them to toughen up, princess. And we really need to understand that there is a softer side that can be seen by boys, and it is okay for boys to cry. Yeah. And we can't expect them to be the alpha male, 24/7, and they're going to have off days. I think
with, thinking about the way that I'm raising my children, I'm not necessarily raising them to toughen up, but at the same time, we do sit around the dinner table and make sure that we're focusing on the positives.
Yeah.
And, we share one good thing about the day. And it's something that I used to do when I was teaching dance classes as well. We'd go around the circle and share one good thing about the week.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see adults, they could, come up with 15 negatives but struggle to come up with the positives. Because of that, I think that I'm raising my children to, not that I don't want to hear about the negatives, but it puts so much emphasis on tell me about the positives and how can we look at this on the brighter side, that perhaps we're not giving enough space to
I mean, obviously there needs to be space to explore the sadness, but you don't want to fall into the hole of sadness that you find it impossible to climb out of.
Dig yourself back out.
Yeah.
So can I ask, how did Kai die and how did you find out about that?
Yes, you can. So there's so many ironies, but so Kai means ocean, and it means shell, in other languages. He died in the water. He was a diver. He knew about weight belts and restraining himself under the water. So he took himself off to the river and weighted himself down to the bottom of the river. we were looking for him on the afternoon of the Wednesday the 26th, and we couldn't locate him at my house, at his girlfriend's house, and it just transpired that we could use a Locate My phone. We found him at Blackwall Reach, which is one of the spots where the kids used to hang out. We found his clothes, and I think at that time, at about 6 p.m. on that night, I thought he'd fallen. I didn't think that I thought he'd fallen and he'd banged his head. I didn't think he'd opted to opt out of this world, but it wasn't until the next day that they did a dive and located his body the next morning.
So police found him?
There was a land search and a water search for him. But yeah, once we actually got into his bank account details and found out that his last purchase had been a weight belt, so he'd actually worn 2 weight belts. They say that there isn't really as many frequent cries for help from boys, and their attempts to complete suicide are more successful when they do decide have a plan. I actually think he'd maybe tried the day prior with a singular weight belt, and had purchased that weight belt on that day. So he had a plan and he stuck to it. And I've heard it talked about in the fight, against depression, that again some of the boys feel a little bit demasculated by the depression, and excuse my French, but it's almost their last way of saying fuck you to depression, and I'm going to show you who's the boss. And it's the final act of taking their life.
Defiance.
Yeah. Which, it ticks the boxes of I can't imagine how much pain you're living in if you're that sad for that length of time. So we need to give boys skills to have alternatives and to not get into that space, which is my goal.
That's what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And how long did it take for you to be able to turn that around and to start the foundation?
The foundation almost started instantaneously in the form of a GoFundMe page, because I kind of knew that Kai was a well-loved person within the community, and I knew kind of once that the word got around, people would want to do something, and there's only so many flowers that you can be bought. So I thought, well, it was through the help of a friend, we set up a GoFundMe page for Beyond Blue. Pretty much it just ran for 6 weeks after he died, and we had $70,000 worth of donations that we gave to Beyond Blue. And around about that time, so it would have been 5 years ago, I'd seen on the ABC the program that is organised by the Tomorrow Men people called Man Up, and it's by the guy Tom Harkin, who's organises the programs that we support. And so I called Beyond Blue and said, we've just donated $70,000 and we'd really like to support these programs. And they said, it's not your job to reinvent the wheel once you've given us the money.
That's our job now.
Yeah, thank you. It's ours. And I was like, oh, it's a bit rough, isn't it?
Yeah. 70 grand is a seriously significant donation.
Yeah.
We're really excited when we get $70.
Yeah. So it's through my colleague Emily Loughlin at work. She was like, well, you don't want to be raising any more dollars for Beyond Blue. I think you're going to have to branch out and do it yourself. So we became the Kai Eardley Foundation, and we sat underneath an umbrella of the Fremantle Foundation in Frio. So they organise all the administration for you, and then they disperse the funds to wherever you want. So we did that for a few years. And we were probably a little bit of an unusual aspect for them because we had so many external people fundraising for us. So it didn't lose its transparency, but I guess it just evolved to the point whereby we needed to get our own charitable license, and that's the process that we went through in 2019, just to set ourselves up and to give ourselves that sort of tax deductible recognition within the ACNC or whatever the charitable body is called, that you need to have for people to give you a donation that's tax deduction. So we've got charitable status, and we've got our own board now, and sort of have total control over how the funds raised are sort of dispersed into the community. So that's what we want.
Yeah, beautiful. And do you think that has helped you going through that grieving process?
I mean, it's definitely allowed me to, I did some work on reframing, how do you see the positive out of the negative? And, if we can save one boy's life, then, that's our job well done, really. So the problem with suicide is you don't know how many people haven't fallen through the net. And with suicide rates at the moment, it's... that they're not decreasing anytime soon. So, and I think with the pandemic, we're only going to see more mental health and more problems. So the programs that we sponsor are not directed at, they're not targeting people with mental health. They're just workshops for boys and girls now to explore what it means just to be 14, 15, 16, growing up in, 2021.
Yeah. So really raising awareness.
Just I guess it's just asking questions around, delving a little bit deeper, asking that second and third question in, how are you and how are you really? And just exploring that it's actually okay to not be okay, and that sometimes by showing that vulnerable side of yourself, you're actually being a little bit more authentic and more real in the eyes of you, and you gain some probably recognition and some status amongst your friends rather than just being the class clown or...
Yeah. It's interesting. I actually think that being vulnerable, it shows more strength than anything.
And I think that, I've only sat through one of the workshops. So Tomorrow Man do a number of modules, and so far we've probably delivered. We're attempting to deliver up to 200 workshops a year at the moment, but we've probably supported maybe 250 over the past couple of years. And that's the big outcome, is that, the vulnerability side, that they're actually able to get their boys to expose. Because what we sort of see is that boys sort of put on this, it's the man with the mask when they rock up at school, and it's the bravado, and it's they're having to be somebody else and not really allowing themselves to be themselves. So the workshop's very powerful. Yeah,
and I think that's something that comes through with all of the people that we speak to here as well, is that often, so many issues aren't spoken about publicly.
Yeah. So
when people are going through, for example, anxiety or depression, whether that's teenagers or people at any age in life, if we don't talk about it, then it's really isolating.
Yeah.
Because not only do you feel this incredible sadness or this, anxiety or however the mental illness is exhibiting in you, not only are you experiencing that, but you're doing it alone and feeling like you need to hide that because there's shame around it.
Yeah.
So if we can get people to speak about it more often, then perhaps we'll see people being, feeling more supported. And I think it's really powerful to know that you're not alone in that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely strength in numbers.
Yeah.
They say it takes a community to raise a child, and I totally second that. We, having emigrated with the kids when they were young, I found that it was the support from the community after I lost Kai that was like overwhelmingly powerful in keeping me going, getting me going back to work. And sometimes you could walk down the street and people don't know that you're that parent that's lost that child, and they might be wondering why you've had a bad day. But there's no label that you carry. You're not a widow, you're not a spinster, you're not anything. You're just
devastated,
just missing a third of your third of your heart. So it's you've got two options, and I use Kai most of the time when I think about what are my options. He wouldn't want me to sit in the corner. I will see him again, and he will be proud of what we've done. You don't really want to bump into him and he'll go, "Oh, well, you started quite well, Mum. It was a good effort, but kind
of went downhill from there, didn't it? It lost a bit of momentum.
Then it lost its momentum, and what was that? The last 25 years about. So now that we've got this ball rolling and we've created the foundation this far, there's no going back. There's no pulling the pin because he will give me a high five and he will be proud of what we've done down the track.
And you mentioned going back to work afterwards.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Like, I I can't fathom it. I can't fathom how you get up the next morning.
I mean, I took some time off, but I was acutely aware that obviously there are 2 more boys in the family, and I needed to be that role model to tell the boys that, you know, bad stuff does happen, and these are the options in life. You know, you either curl up in a ball and, you know, become an alcoholic, or
tempting.
And you know, there are days when, you know, there is solace at the end of a bottle of wine. But really, they do need to know that no matter what life throws at you, that you can stand up and continue. And I'm so proud. You know, my oldest has gone on to teach. My youngest one is at uni completing his teaching. And yeah, they talk fondly, and you know, we reminisce about Kai all the time. But it hasn't derailed them and sent them off on a tangent. So I kind of wanted to be that person that could say, you know, nobody wanted this, but this is what we've been dealt with, and this is how we're going to get through it. So I
think if we don't get to choose what happens, but we have choice of how we respond and how we react. Yeah.
So I mean, I can remember there was a day going, you know, screw it, I'm not going back to work. Stuff that.
Yeah.
And then I actually realised I was turning my back on the entire community that had just supported me through the funeral. And you know, if I couldn't even rock up and say thanks to the people that had been there and do that, then what sort of person was I? So actually going back to work, and then obviously with the fundraising and work has, you know, been a super supportive environment and probably an outlet, and probably sometimes a little bit, you know, there are grey areas between how much, you know, I do foundation work and how much I ask all the people that come to physio to support, buy the merchandise and buy the t-shirt or the pair of socks or the cap or the beanie or the drinks bottle, or come to the fundraiser or the quiz night or whatever it is that we're organising. So I guess, you know, the whole journey hasn't had there was no story pre, post or during. It's just kind of evolving as we go, but I definitely recognise that I've exhausted the generosity of the Silas Street community of where I work, and now is the time to expand and to
maybe step that circle out a little bit more.
Look slightly further afield, because like I say, you know, everybody's bought the black t-shirt, the white t-shirt, the grey hoodie, the beanie, the cap, the socks. You know, they're sick of me throwing merchandise at them. So so we are making that sort of corporate progression, hopefully to a wider network, and not just to the Frio based people, but to try and get not just south of the river but now north of the river and further afield, and to get Kai Fella will be as big as Beyond Blue, mark my words.
Nice. Yeah, awesome. You spoke about your other 2 boys.
Yeah.
How old were they when this happened?
So Cam was 22 and Joey was 16. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, different perspectives on the event, as Cam is the older brother. Obviously, I think felt more responsibility towards not having solved the problem. Yeah. He's a little bit similar to me in that respect. Joey has, you know, just a beautiful 16-year-old approach of Kai was sad and Kai's not sad anymore. And sometimes, you know, when I get sad and he tells me that, then that's almost enough. Yeah. Just to, because half of the grief that you have is, and again, I had to do a bit of work about this, but, you know, they say that you can't grieve. You know, you're grieving for all the things that you thought were going to happen. Yeah. You're thinking of, you know, he was going to be one of my physios. He was going to come to work with me. You know, it was going to be the extension. You know, the practice was going to continue in the family name. And you kind of projected. He was going to
get married. He was going to have children. You would have grandchildren.
You projected all that onto something, and you actually can't grieve for something that hasn't happened. So you just have to, go back to the 16-year-old, and he was sad, and he's not sad anymore.
Yeah. I think that's as well what you were saying about Cam feeling as though he was feeling guilty that he should have been able to solve the problem. Yeah. That I think a lot of people put that on themselves, that I should have seen it or I should have known. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Again, and, you know, looking to the end of the wine bottle and asking that question, you know, I can sit there with Joey, my youngest, you know, and say, you know, I should have been able to do more. You know, why couldn't we you know, we worked this out? And he was like, Mum, you did everything. You know, you couldn't have done any more. So I think the shoulda, woulda, coulda, and the if onlys, you really need to let go of those, and you really need to focus your energy on what you can do on the flip side of the coin, not on the woulda, shoulda, coulda, because it's not going to help at all. It doesn't get you anywhere.
No.
And just know, I think the thing to be mindful of if anybody does have children going through any sort of issues is, with all the support services in place, there are still big cracks in the net. So, I thought, having put all the support services in place and the psychiatry and the psychologists and the medications, I thought I was ticking all those boxes, but you're not. So, if you really have super concerns for your child's health and wellness, Kai didn't want to go to Perth Clinic. That was an option on that day, and he'd already sussed out his exit plan. So he was offered Perth Clinic and he declined. We really need to be working on the problems prior to them getting to the point of being offered Perth Clinic, because Perth Clinic to a 20-year-old is something pretty scary. You probably, I'd probably say no to Perth Clinic, and it's sort of that has stigmas associated with it.
How do we break down those stigmas? I don't know if you know the answer to that.
I don't know if I do know the answers. I mean, I suppose, communication is the key, and I think the school systems are going about it a lot better in addressing the whole anxiety, mental health thing, and talking about it, and it not being such an issue as it was. But yeah, I mean, just being a kid and growing up now, I think is super hard with social media expectations, and and
especially I think with COVID and the restrictions that we've had for the last 15-18 months. Here in Western Australia, we haven't been as impacted as other parts of the world, but we've still had restrictions in place, and so we're trying to tell kids to spend less time on social media, less time connected to a screen, go outside more. At the same time, all your classes need to be done online. Uni's closed, TAFE's closed, schools for a certain period last year were closed, so we're going to disconnect you from all of your social connections, and the only way you can connect to those is online.
Yeah, I know. It's and I think, I think the federal budget earlier in the year, highlighted the fact that we probably are going to see rises in mental health and people accessing services down the track because of COVID. Suicide rates can't get any worse. So, they
Please
can.
don't say that. Yeah.
They've tripled in the last 20 years. And so, we need to be, that's why I'm sort of a powerful advocate for what we're doing at a grassroots level, is that we need to be giving kids skills younger and younger in dealing with emotion and dealing with sadness and maybe the shitty side of life. And not just, all the social media of brag book and, how glossy and wonderful does my life look.
That's it. I think, when you've got my reality versus your polished version that you're putting on social media, and when you make that comparison, it's really not healthy for anyone.
No. So, I don't know, how do we reverse that? How do we undo what's already been established within the social media world? I don't know how we do that.
No.
Apart from talking to our kids and explaining to them that what they're seeing and all the glory and all the beautiful things. People, I'd really like it if people put a few more shitty things up on Facebook,
Yeah. You know what? My house is never tidy. And I think, when my friends come over and say that, that's my community service.
No, my house isn't tidy either.
I think, you know what? Cleaning my house is not part of my skill set, but I'm just, so that people can come over and feel more comfortable that my house is not Instagram worthy.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing. That's my way of giving back. How's that?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. But have you found that? So it's, it's coming up to 5 years. That's a significant milestone for you.
Yeah, and you'd love to be able to say time is a healer and it gets easier, but unfortunately in this case, it just means it's another year without him, and that almost it's really hard to fathom that it's actually been 5 years since I've seen him. So, and it I know it will be many, many more years because I'm going to live a very long life. Yeah. But yeah, time in this situation doesn't really mend the broken heart, unfortunately.
Has it got easier? And I know that as you come up to a milestone, it must be feeling really quite raw for you at the moment.
Has it got easier? I guess it may be ebbs and flows in a little bit, but the foundation and the work that we're doing and looking to that out of the tragedy that we've experienced, that we have had this opportunity to create something positive. If you can focus on that, keep your eyes on the prize and try not to we talk a lot about the Coyote Foundation, but then when you actually get back to the reason as to why you've started it, then that can be a little bit heartbreaking. So I don't think I think the buttons that get pushed when we talk about it sometimes are switched on and sometimes are switched off. So there might be good days for me, and there may be more tricky days. Yeah.
Do you find yourself feeling guilty because you might have not thought about him for a little while, or focused on the work rather than the reason behind it, or
I mean, it's such a funny thing that I think about him every day, and no disrespect to the other two boys, but in his absence I must think about him more than I think about the other two boys, because I guess I know that they're okay. So the irony is you end up not being here and you end up consuming my mind, so it's not that there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about him in some shape or form. I never wanted to lose the child and be that person that never spoke about him again. No. So as uncomfortable as sometimes it is for people, I do like to talk about him. So people will come into the practice and sometimes they don't know that I've the history behind the three of us, or our family, and that there are pictures and our foundation posters are around, so that people can gradually, and there's a lot of merchandise around, so they can sort of see that they've sort of stepped into a dual world really of our foundation and the physio practice as well. Yeah. And have you found yourself trying to make sure that you keep that balance of making sure that you are there for for your two boys and not turning your house into a shrine? I'm very mindful of not turning my house into a shrine. I mean, we haven't saved the bedroom so that it looked like Kai's last sleep or anything like that. I had an interesting occasion where a photographer wanted to come around, and it was obviously something to do with the West, and they wanted an image of perhaps me sitting clutching a photo. Clutching his teddy on the bed. Yeah. And I was like, it's the laundry now, so we can go and stand with the washing machine if you like.
How did you turn a bedroom into the laundry? Well, I mean, there must have been some major renovations, unless you had him sleeping in a laundry.
Well, the funniest so we've only got a little tiny house. The three boys used to sleep together. Eventually, Cam got to sleep in the third bedroom, and then Kai and Joey shared the bedroom for a long time. And there's 4 years between Kai and Joey, and all he wanted was his own room, and all we had was the laundry. So we were sort of able to convert the laundry into a bedroom for him. So it had a loft bed with a little study table underneath, and that was literally all that fitted in there. And where
did your washing machine go?
Went outside onto the deck. So then his bedroom, we just converted the laundry back to the laundry. But for me, people know that if they can send me anything with a rainbow on, that is the cheerful thing that I would have in my house. So if you look around my house, I've got rainbow candles, rainbow mugs, rainbow doormat, rainbow keyring. So there's little bits for me that I am the crazy rainbow lady, and I don't want to be the person that clutches his teddy on his bed, and has that sad. I want him to be remembered, and I want it to be a happy memory. Not I mean, obviously it's not a happy topic to discuss, but it's a real topic, and but it can have we can make a positive change. That's my goal.
Yeah. And so the rainbows make up part of the logo for the Kai fella.
Yeah, they do a rainbow on a skateboard. Yeah.
So Kai was a skateboarder?
Kai was a skateboarder. And when the kids were quite young, so Joey was too young to go, but I think Kai would only have been probably 11 or 12 and Cam must have been 16. They would have spent a summer holidays just doing street skating, and there would have been a mob of them that went around various spaces through the school holidays. So they each created a little YouTube clip, and it was set to music. You can actually see that if you Google Kai Erdley Get Lucky. And it's all his he was an amazing skateboarder, and it's all his skateboarding tricks to a 3-minute song. We played it at his funeral because it kind of showed just his tenacity of falling off and getting back up again and trying again. And he was a surfer, he was a water baby, he was a skater. So a rainbow on a skateboard seemed like the perfect logo for us as it evolved, and it was literally just there was no business planning to this model. It was just rolling out as we go.
Yeah, sometimes that's the best way.
Yeah.
When there's less red tape, you can move where you need to move with the way that you need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. And what if you were talking to family or the mum of somebody who has just gone through a similar experience to what you have?
Yeah.
What would you have wanted to know way back at the beginning? What would you want to share with someone who was starting this journey?
I mean, if they're starting the journey with somebody who's just been diagnosed with raging depression or anxiety, then I guess my ignorance was that I didn't know that depression killed. I understood that my child had anxiety and depression, but I didn't think that where my outcome was going. And statistically, as the mother of 3 boys at that time, aged between 15 and 24, the statistic for that age group is 6 boys a day will take their life. And I actually had 3 of them. And I had one very unwell one. Yeah. And I still didn't take the suicide option as an option that was being presented to me. Yeah. Despite the psychiatrist saying, do you want to be admitted to Perth Clinic? To me, it still wasn't. I thought that he would come to me if there were those thoughts in his brain. So
were you with him when the psychiatrist asked that?
Yeah. Yeah. And he said, no, I don't want to go to Perth Clinic.
Did the psychiatrist, sorry, I've cut you off, but did the psychiatrist say to you, look, this is really serious and I'm concerned here?
He basically said, look, you don't have private health cover, top private health cover. If you want to go home and upgrade your private health cover to cover Perth Clinic, that is an option that you could do. At the moment, it's going to be $5,000 a week. And I think Kai was just mortified at the money I was churning out in an attempt, because it's not cheap to go and see a psych. It's $500 a pop. Yeah. And to him, I think he thought, you're pouring money down the drain. This is not going to get better. So yeah, it was the first time I'd met the psychiatrist. I phoned him up the next day and explained the situation and said, look, we've lost him. And I can remember sitting on the step outside my house because I didn't want to point the finger of blame at him, but he just said, Claire, these are random acts. We could have had him admitted to Perth Clinic, and if it was in his head,
he still would have done it.
He still would have done it.
Yeah.
And that's the bit where, when people say that, we're putting children on suicide watch, I think, can we watch them 24 hours a day? We really need to be trying to solve those issues before we get to the point where kids are not taken, we're not being serious about how the extent of their sadness, really. And yeah, as a parent who probably speaks out around the loss of Kai, I am probably a target to other people finding me through the foundation and through the work that we do. And, I've spoken to a few ladies now who are, the mothers of sons that they've lost. And yeah, you're united in the same grief. We all have different ways of dealing with it. And yeah, for me, the foundation was just the easiest way to do something positive.
To channel all of that grief and turn it into something positive.
Yeah,
a bit like the rainbow.
Yeah.
And I did cut you off there. And okay. So what would you want to say to people who are going through this?
Look, from if there is a way out. There is help. You know, don't give up. There are some amazing psychologists out there. You know, you're not automatically going to find the right fit the first time you go to see a psych. You've got to find somebody that just, you know, can unlock your brain and can help you see the way out. But to take your life it's not the solution. You know, I sometimes wonder if Kai looks back down and can see not the devastation, but the ripple effect of the number of lives that this has affected, and just know that you're worth it and it will get better. No matter how far down that tunnel you are, there are other doors and other ways out for you other than the exit route. So,
and I know that you don't want to go back and look at the what ifs and the shoulda, coulda, woulda, but I'm imagining that you have, because I don't think that you could you could go through that. So if you had your time over with Kai again, what would you have done differently? Like you said that, don't wait until you're at that pointy end.
Yeah.
How can we make sure that we're supporting people earlier?
You know, I guess knowing the warning signs, knowing, you know, the not ignoring behavioural change in your child, not, you know, the sleep deprivation. You know, Kai was an adult; he was 20. You know, really, as a parent, I think we have input. You know, we're lucky if we can make a change up to probably about the age of 9 or 10. I think they say with boys, and beyond that, it's just, you know, you've kind of got the formative years in place, and the rest is left to chance almost. But you know, you can't really control a child beyond 18 years of age. They're an adult; they can make their own decisions. But you know, if you can detect changes in your child in the 15, 16-year-old bracket, and you can see them losing sleep, and you can see mood swings, you know, Kai had all of those. You know, he couldn't sleep at night, loss of appetite, you know, the panic attacks. The writing was, you know, almost there for me on the wall, but I just didn't read it. I didn't read it as well as I could have. It's
very tricky because all of those things, what we are told, are normal for, you know, teenage boys going through puberty, and, you know, that whole, teenage boys, they don't sleep, they don't talk, they just grunt, don't come out of their room, don't talk to anyone, don't shower, you know, all of those things that we're told is normal.
And I suppose, you know, the other thing I would, and this is no detriment to any of the healthcare systems, is, you know, my boys are relatively fit and healthy boys, but we've lost that connection of a family GP. So you could look into Kai's eyes, and I can show you a picture of Kai, and you can see that he's lost.
Yeah, the spark's gone.
And I think to any practitioner that's known that child from his behaviour as a 8, 9, 10-year-old to his behaviour as a 16, 17-year-old, you would be like, holy shit, there's something the matter with this child. He went 6, 7, 8, 9 times to different GPs who, you know,
10 minutes if you're lucky.
Who, you know, suggested maybe to go and take some sleepy tea, try 20 minutes of physical exercise, you know, take some, you know, meditation, listen to some meditation tapes. You know, it's hard for, like I say,
all really useful tips, you know,
all excellent ideas, but
definitely get outside, get some fresh air, get some exercise, make sure you're eating good food.
He ran his socks off. He went and ate the best food possible.
Yeah.
And yet, still inside, I think that he just lacked the happy chemicals that were in his brain. I think for whatever reason there was the chemical imbalance, and all the happy chemicals had gone, and we were just left with just a really sad person.
Yeah.
And you know, I made efforts to try and refill those batteries. Him and Joey went off on a surfing holiday to Bali, you know, and I was like, you know, just try and get all the things that you like, all the sun, the surfing, the good diet, you know, the sunshine. And I picked him up from the airport. This is probably only 2 weeks before he died. And I looked in, I could see as soon as he walked through the arrivals that the lights had gone back out in his eyes. And even if there was a little sparkle while he was away, it just, whatever it was about being in Perth, just
reality came crashing back, and dulled that spark.
Yeah, so it's as clear as day for me to look back on those photos, as to see his eyes when he'd lost the sparkle. So I think you know, listen to your gut intuition if you're a parent, if you can see that in your child, and you can see that behavioural change, and yeah, don't get fobbed off that it's normal, or that, you know. And I had plenty, you know, I spoke to plenty of friends, and they were like, it's just a phase, he'll grow out of it, you know, don't worry. I was like, no, honestly, the wheels are falling off, this is shit.
Yeah.
And I guess I knew, and if I, you know, they do say listen a little bit to your gut.
Yeah, and I, you know, when my son was very little, I was taking him to a couple of different doctors because I, you know, in my gut, I knew that there was something that we needed to work on. And the first doctor prescribed medication on the spot. I'm like, yeah, let's maybe, you've known him for about 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that this is the best course of action. The fourth doctor told me that I was neurotic and I needed medicating. Yeah. And, you know, because we, as you say, we don't have that good connection with GPs anymore. We don't have that ability to be able to check things out and to question. And often the professionals are very quick to go, oh, no, it's normal, it's fine, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And you can be, if you're worried about being labelled as neurotic or a helicopter mum or things like that, you just got to push through sometimes and go, yeah, look, you can think what you want of me. In my gut, I know something's not right.
And I suppose, you know, as an allied health professional myself, you know, when people, you know, that's one of my questions is, do you have a regular GP? And they're like, no, I don't need to go to a doctor. And I said, well, you know, it's great, but it's also really important that you do have a connection with somebody. I said, so if the wheels do fall off, somebody's got your back, because, you know, that was what I did notice about, you know, the GPs that knew me. You know, they were super supportive. And yeah, there are amazing doctors out there that can get you through, but you know, find a good one and create that rapport. And yeah, if you only go once every 2 years, at least they know when you turn up for a valid reason, and you're not just going for a yarn. Go for a
Tuesday afternoon visit.
So that's, and again, I'm no expert, but that's just been my personal experience with general practice.
Yeah. Any thoughts on, I guess, as you've moved through it, has there been anything that has made it easier for you, or been anything that has been surprising or, you know, uplifting?
I mean, the journey and association with the Melbourne guys has been, you know, I've got some great friends and associates over in Melbourne. I mean, we don't get to go over there or haven't been over for the last couple of years, but yeah, really strong support from a group of people who are doing amazing work with youth. I wouldn't have had that, you know, that these are all upsides of connections or extensions of friendships that I would not wouldn't necessarily have had. So I suppose community support and seeing just how much you know, people that aren't family want to help you through a difficult time. You know, I've got like huge respect for the community that have supported me and helped me to get where we've got the foundation this far. And yeah, huge respect for the guys over in Melbourne, Tomorrow Man, Tomorrow Woman, and the work that they're doing. And I do feel very honoured, very privileged to be able to support their work.
This is possibly a tricky question, but do you think that with starting the foundation, does it feel heavy? Does it feel like you've taken up this work, not necessarily because it's something that you've chosen, but because it's, you know, do you feel obligated to keep going?
Well, I feel the obligation because of my belief that I will see Kai and that I'm not failing on his behalf, and I'm not having him telling me I've done a half-assed job. So there is obligation, and there is, you know, I will continue this journey through the foundation, for as long as I'm here on the planet. So it's not something that I think you dabble in, you go, oh, we might start a charity, that's all quite hard. People don't really want to give, do they?
And it is really hard starting a charity.
And it has been challenging. And again, you know, like I say, there's no business model. You just roll through it with whatever skills you have, and with the support of whoever you can find to drag in for the journey while you're getting there. But to have got this far and to still, you know, nearly 5, you know, it will be 5 years next week, and to still have have that foundation and that charitable status, and to know that we're supporting more workshops and we're going to continue to grow. It's pressure, but it's a good pressure. It's, you know, it's the foot on the pedal and moving forward.
Yeah. And do you think that it's helping you, or do you think that it's like adding you to a risk of burnout?
I don't think there's burnout. I think I'm definitely guilty of keeping busy, and being busy doesn't allow time for idle thoughts. I work full time and then squeeze in the foundation work around my full time job, and I do want to get a better balance so that I work a little bit less in the physio practice and have a little bit more time for occasions like this that don't happen, you know, squeezed in you know, in an hour that I've got free. And I do, you know, I think that this work, you know, clients have asked me, you know, what would you do if you didn't have the practice? You know, that's all you've done. And I was like, well, I just do more foundation work. You know, I've got purpose. It's not like I'm going to retire and, you know, sit on my bottom.
A week of that would be quite nice, don't you think?
Yeah, a week's holiday every now and then would be great. But I think this is you know, Silas Street the purpose of Silas Street was feed, clothe and educate the boys. And I feel that, you know, we achieved that. I'm happy for that just to tick along in the background now. And I recognise that unless I put more energy and effort into the foundation, these things don't grow by themselves. They do need to be pushed and stirred and chivied along. So that's where I want to pour my energy now.
And have your boys become part of this as well?
They definitely attend occasions. You know, they're always good for all the balls and all the black tie events and the free drinks. That's always, that's always popular. So we had an amazing occasion at the Ritz-Carlton a couple of last October. So they're super helpful. They'll sell merch. They'll I haven't quite got them into the public speaking forum, but
give it time.
Cam's a much better public speaker than I am, and maybe there was some talk of maybe him doing some sort of facilitation work and being involved a little bit with the whole Tomorrow Man setup. So there's lots of options for us to continue down the track. But it's a positive outlet for them, and I think it helps them put a positive slant on missing their brother. And
so you said Cam's a teacher and Joey's training to be a teacher? Yeah. So do you think, are they secondary teachers or?
Yeah, Cam teaches at Iona in Mosman Park.
So I'm wondering whether or not this kind of work influences how he's interacting with some of those teens as well.
I definitely think he's got a lot more insight into mental health and how kids are travelling, and probably recognises, you know, his importance and his position within the school of being, you know, supportive of students, that some who aren't coping, some who are, you know, turning up at girls' footy events on the weekend, you know, as their teacher, you know, extracurricular stuff that he just does, you know, I'm super proud of him. Yeah,
teachers really do make a huge difference in the world.
And I think, you know, it could be the difference between, you know, getting that support at, you know, in those middle senior years that can turn a child from gloom to, you know, to shining.
Beautiful. And with the work that you do with the foundation and trying to balance that and looking after yourself, do you find it can be quite difficult when you're trying to live with your own grief and process your own grief to have other people come up and share their grief with you?
I mean, I think, you know, probably the physio training and just being able to put up that boundary between listening to somebody else's problems and it blending with your own. I think, I think having had an experience such as my own, it gives me probably some depth of empathy that I've wouldn't previously have had if people had shared really difficult stories with me. You know, I do try to practice, you know, yoga or something to try and refill my my central level of
refill your cup.
My cup, because I do recognise that you do need physical health to be mentally well as well, and for me, the physicality of yoga with the quietness of the yoga sort of marries those two together, and I'm sort of it's a nice space to be in.
Helps balance out the keeping busy so that you don't
Yeah.
have that mental chatter, and also
Yeah.
finding time for quiet.
Yeah. So, and you know, I haven't. COVID was tricky, and we were practicing yoga at home, and it's not quite the same.
It's really not, is it?
I do need the yoga studio, but
Especially if you've got dogs. My 3 dogs come and climb underneath me
Yeah,
while
yeah.
I'm practicing yoga at
Yeah.
home. I'm like, seriously, I can only hold this for so long.
This is
I'm
not
going to
this
crush you.
It's not working. Yeah. So yeah, and I do know when I did practice regularly in the studio, the hour was dedicated to Kai, and so it was just a really nice, quiet space that I would allow my brain to
be with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess it's tricky in that we're trying to talk about how important it is to speak about experiences, because when we talk about experiences, then we remove some of the stigma of them, and we let people know that you're not alone. And I think you said 1 in 6 boys will attempt to take their life.
6 boys a day.
6 boys a day will attempt.
Will succeed. Age between 15 and 24.
When we're looking at 6 boys a day, is that in Australia?
Mm-hmm.
So 6 boys a day in Australia are taking their own lives.
2 girls a day as well.
So we're losing 8 of our children every day.
8 children, yeah.
Which means there are 8 parents out there every day
Yeah.
who are losing a child.
Yeah.
That is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, it's not, you know, we lose more people to suicide than we do to road death, but we don't seem to be pouring the funds into explaining that to the community or to...
Yeah.
I mean, and I do say to people, if people come to me at the practice and tell me that their kids are struggling, I tell them, you know, it's great you're getting the psychologist or you're getting the GP involved, but, you know, that safety net isn't foolproof. Don't think that you've ticked all the boxes. I thought I'd done that. So I'm giving you the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
But, you know, be aware that...
Be a bit vigilant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all, like I say, all I can say is based on my own personal experience. So,
So with the, I guess, you know, I asked you whether or not it's hard for you to hear other people's experiences with that, but at the same time we're saying, well, let's, you know, try and talk about this more often. How do people go when they hear you speak about losing Kai? And, you know, I think there's still this stigma around suicide, and, you know,
I think it's always quite, you know, it's unusual, and people don't get up and say, you know, hi, my name's Claire and I lost my son to suicide. It's not something that is comfortably spoken about, and that is, you know, one of our goals with the foundation is to reduce the stigma around suicide. And years and years ago, and probably going back into the 50s and the 60s in the US, they thought that there was this sort of copycatting, and so that's sort of where journalism has originated from, the fact that if a suicide was reported on in the newspaper, then there seemed to be a spike in it.
Yeah.
So then, you know, it stops being reported on, and then we stop talking about it, and then we've created the elephant in the room. So, I think, you know, the scary thing is if you're, you know, in a room full of people, you could probably see that almost, even not directly through family loss, but everybody will know of somebody who's lost somebody to suicide. So it's out there. We just shouldn't be losing such a vibrant
8 of our children every day.
Yeah. And that's just in that category that we will be losing. It will spike again in the over 60s, again in men more than women. So yeah, it's a dreadful statistic.
It really is. Yeah. And I think when you flip it around and think that's 8 families every day that are being impacted by, you know, that's 8 schools, 8 communities, 8... Yeah. It is a dreadful statistic.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not a parent. I don't point the finger of blame at anybody. You know, I think there is some responses to loss where, you know, we look outwardly. We don't, you know, we start pointing the fingers that it's your fault. It's the school. It's the teacher. It's the mates. It's, you know, it's everybody else's problem except our own. I think, don't point the finger. Don't beat yourself up. Don't beat anybody else up. But just acknowledge where we're at and try and create not some good out of it, but some awareness, or know that you're not alone going through this, and that you know, I would have had I don't know how many parents approach me having lost children, just because I probably put my name out there and my emails at the bottom of our website. So, it's always very, it's always, it's either friends who have lost their best mate and they want to do, they want to support, they want to raise money for, to honour their friend. And all the stories are all quite similar. He was the most vibrant, gregarious, big-hearted fellow, and he's the one that's not here. And that's my story. That's their story. That seems to be the story. And
Kai had the world at his feet.
He had, he couldn't see it.
No.
And for all intents and purposes, he couldn't recognise his own self-worth. He couldn't see how brilliant he was, and self-recognition and is not being able to see that, I think, is a super tragedy. And we can all see it in hindsight. You ask the boys, they'll tell you he was the smartest, most handsome out of the three of them by far. Naughtiest, smartest. But with the option of a good job ahead of him, beautiful girlfriend.
Loving, supportive family, did really well in his ATAR, studying what he wanted to study. Yeah. And I guess that's the thing, that the material goods or it doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything. So,
and you can't pick who it's likely to be either.
No. And you wonder whether is it something I did as a parent? I thought I parented, like I say, the three of them equally.
Nature versus nurture.
Yeah. I've kind of slackened off a little bit more on Joey, who, hasn't taken the typical route of, he's 21, but he hasn't completed all of his uni yet. Because he's like, Mum, I'm just going to do a couple of units. I'm going to be fine.
Yeah.
A bit more casual about life. And then at the end of the day, you're like, it's better to be casual than happy.
Yeah. And that's it. It does help you kind of put things into perspective a little bit, doesn't it? So before we wrap up for this episode, thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this and letting me dig into some very painful wounds. Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to talk and share my experience. It will make some people uncomfortable. It's not a pleasant topic to talk about, but anybody going through it, know that you're not alone. Reach out to, you can reach out to our foundation, kaifella.com. You can find
all be in the show notes.
You can find my email. But thank you for having me, and I hope I haven't been too teary.
Yeah. No, I very much appreciate you coming on, and I'll try and cut out most of the parts where both of us cried. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of A Hidden World of Women, a podcast brought to you by Women's Health and Wellbeing Services. For more information on the services we offer, head to whws.org.au or Women's Health and Wellbeing Services on YouTube and social media. Looking forward to the next episode where we uncover the hidden world of women.